Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about water damage. Now behind me is the Typhon 6S, but that's not important because what I'm going to show you applies equally to all of the RC cars out there. If you run them in wet grass, run them in snow, if you run them through puddles, submerge them, or even hit them with the hose when you're cleaning them up, you can cause damage to the car you're not anticipating. Now, the thing is, there are a few steps that you can take to prevent that damage from happening. So this one, it went out to a video shoot with me. Unfortunately, it didn't make it on camera because the video was for another car. However, when we brought it back, it was a mess. We hit it with the hose. Of course, we avoided the electronics and stuff. We just hosed around that and cleaned it up as best we could. Then I hung it up and let it dry. The problem is I forgot it was out there. So I found it a week later, and what I'm about to discuss with you had begun. Now this one isn't to the stage where it's going to be difficult and we don't have to get in depth with it, but it's good enough for you to see the kind of damage that's in there, and it's also good enough to demonstrate what I'm talking about. In this video we'll pull this down and we'll clean it out and we'll get everything back up and running, and I'll show you how that's done. And then I'll explain to you what we need to do immediately upon bringing it back and cleaning it up to prevent damage in the future. Now these cars come with steel bolts and they do rust, so there's a way to prevent that. So let's get it on the bench and we'll check it out. Okay, so first what we're going to want to do here is get all the debris out of the car, and this one sat for a week, so this is really dry and hard. It'll be a lot easier to get out when the car is still moist. So let's take a minute here and get all the debris out of the car and start with that. Also, look at the tangled debris on the front arms and the rear arms where they attach the wheels. That gets in between those components in there and binds things down, and it holds on to moisture. So have a good look at that. That is definitely something you want to get out right away. Now we're going to remove the hubs to get any debris that might be between the hub and the bearing itself, and this will also allow us access to the bearings. In this area you'll find more debris that was pinched between the hubs and the bearings. Make sure to get all of that out so you can have a clean start when you go to lube this thing down. This is also a good time to go ahead and make any adjustments that you may need to the carriers or whatever while you've got the hubs off. Okay, so now it's time to go ahead and plug in a battery and get your parts rolling real slow so you can add your lubrication. Make sure you lubricate each bearing, check, make sure everything frees up nicely, and get all of the connection points between the drive lines and the out shafts and the differential housings. Make sure everything's lubricated. There are a number of bearings that we need to make sure and hit. There are 2 on the center drive line. There's 1 on the driveline shaft front and rear differentials. There are 2 on the output shaft for the differentials, and there are 2 per hub. So we want to make sure and get lubrication in all of those. Check to make sure that everything is free. If there's any binding, you must take that bearing out and work it over or replace it. Keeping in mind that the vehicle you're looking at on the screen has absolute minimal damage. The rust buildup is superficial. There is no need to take any of the bearings out on this car, but that does not mean you won't have to take them out on yours. And this is the reason for doing this maintenance in the first place. When you first get your car back and you get it cleaned out and dried up some, you want to get this lubrication in the bearings right away to help prevent any kind of rust buildup. And that's what this is for. Remember, you don't have to take everything apart if you do it right away. If you neglect it, you will be pulling bearings out and you will be doing a lot more work than if you just do the maintenance right away. Now, using silicone lubricant, go ahead and spray the bottom of the car and get all of the nuts and bolts. Rub it in with a rag really good and clean up the excess. Now go ahead and use the same towel with the lubricant already on it and wipe down the rest of the car. It'll clean off the dirt and it won't hurt the plastic at all as long as you're using a silicone lubricant and not an oil-based product. So now it's time to go ahead and rebuild the out drives, putting the hubs back in place and making sure everything is clean and moving freely. With the widening kit, you'll notice there are a number of choices you can use for tires. You can go anywhere from the big tires to the street tires to the regular tires that go on it. The widening kit makes it wider by the width of one standard tire for the car. So you don't need to run this kit. I put it on just to see if it increased stability.
So there you have it, water damage repaired. And you know, it wasn't very difficult on this one. You know, it sat for a little while, but nothing got substantial. It got easy to repair everything. So that was good. Now, if you follow the steps that we're going to lay out right now, this should help you prevent any damage like this from happening to your car. Step one, when you bring it in, take a look inside. And once you look inside, if the internal components or the bearing areas are wet at all, then what you want to do is make sure you clean the car properly. Get it clean as best you can. Hose it out if you want to, whatever, that's fine. But be sure not to spray the hose on the speed control or radio box. Those two are kind of susceptible to water, so stay away from that. Once you get the hose work done, then I recommend you either towel it out best you can, or if you have access to an air compressor, blow it out. But there's a couple things you got to watch out for when you're using a an air compressor. And one of those is, take a look here. This is the speed control. If this is moist at all, which is why we're doing this video, don't hit this with the air compressor. It can drive moisture down inside. There's moving parts in the fan. You can drive water up into that, and you can actually cause damage to the speed control, so be really careful there. On the radio end of things, although this is considered to be a water resistant radio box, there is an area right here where the leads go into the box, and that's just a foam gasket. It's a little split gasket about like so, and you put the leads through it and that pinch is closed, but it's not perfect. So if you hit that with a blast of air, you can drive moisture into the radio box, causing even more problems. And for the last bit right here, if you take a look at your motor, and whatever brand you have, look for the motor and just have a look at the bell end here. And on the end, if this is sealed, then you probably don't have too much to worry about on the rear bearing in the motor, unless it stayed in a puddle for a little while. And it doesn't take too awful long for water to seep in there. If it did sit in a puddle for a little while, this might be a concern, and you might want to look into that, and that'll be a different video. But on the front side where the bearing comes out, or where the pinion comes out, there's a bearing right there, and you want to make sure and get some lubrication on that. So once you do those things, there's one more step that you need to keep in mind. All of the screws and bolts on these cars are metal, and what I mean by that is they rust. Okay, now unless you change yours out with stainless steel, and you can do that, but it's a project. But once you do that, take the bottom of the car and see all them bolts sticking up on there. Just spray a layer of silicone lubricant on there, and I'm a fan of silicone lubricant, and here's why. So I like to use this stuff. It works really well, it's inexpensive, and it does a great job. But most importantly, once it sits for a little while, it dries, which means it won't attract dust and dirt and debris. Don't use WD-40 because that stays moist. Dust, dirt, and debris will stick to your car and cause further issues. Plus, WD-40 can actually soften the plastic, and in the wrong application, that could be bad, especially if you're going to spray the entirety of your car with it. I don't recommend that at all. Definitely use the silicone lubricant. You can hose the thing down with it, wipe it off with the chamois, and it'll prevent rust. So any bolts and nuts and anything that you're having issues with or you don't want to have issues with, just make sure and give a little layer of that on there and you're good to go. So there you have it. Water damage complete. Hopefully this will help you in the future. You know, if you like the content, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. It's fantastic when you do. So until the next video, I'm AJ from AJ Jam Studios saying, keep wrenching, guys.